Welcome to the Badlands, a place I don't think I or anyone I'm going to talk to expected to be. My name is Jared, and for the last 9 months, I've been an out-of-work ad agency senior suit. My last role was the Regional Client Service Director at Grey Singapore, delivering work around Southeast Asia and India. I returned to London last year, fully imagining I'd been in another agency fairly quickly, as had been the case over the last 2 decades, but not so much this time. So I found myself wandering the Badlands. In these 9 months, I've noticed a few odd things in our industry, and I've also noticed a surprising amount of ex-colleagues and clients all in a similar position to me. So I thought it might be helpful and maybe interesting to talk to some of these people, to see how they're doing, discover their experiences, understand what they're looking for, and maybe shine a light on them and their talents, but most importantly, check in with them, as it's a lonely experience being in the Badlands. So this morning, please welcome Katrina Vines. Katrina and I have never worked together, but over the 20-odd years or so, we have worked at a lot of the same agencies, in the same roles. She's a senior business director / client partner, and she's been a contractor for the last 10 years, give or take. But like me and many others we know, she's currently in the Badlands. So please welcome Katrina Vines. Katrina, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm all right, Jared. Thank you very much for inviting me onto this. These are really cool, by the way. Like I've really enjoyed listening to the other couple that you've put out.
Oh, that's really sweet. Well, look, I like doing it. I like having these conversations. I think the people I do them with, we get a lot of value out of them, and hopefully we can start to spread them. So people who are out there looking for people, fingers crossed, there are people looking for people. They may get to see you and hear you. So I guess with that in mind, for all our listeners, and you and I were just talking about my analytics of my podcast, which will remain private for now, but there's millions of people listening to this, Katrina, not to scare you, but why don't you give those people your 60-second Katrina Vines career summary for the people listening?
Well, I am extremely talented, very, very experienced business director / client partner. As you mentioned, majority of my career, which is almost 2 decades long, has been spent contracting and freelancing. So I'm not unfamiliar with the Badlands because necessarily, I've spent time in and out of work. As kind of a feature of being a freelancer. Sometimes you are in, sometimes you're not. But I've mentioned this to you already. I've never known it as bad,
right,
as it is at the moment.
I think it's why I never took that leap to go contractor, because I was always terrified of this type of thing happening. But I think,
it didn't used to. So this is the thing. Like it was always, the industry that we work in. So advertising has always been propped up to a great extent by these kind of like fractional experts who are able to come in and give their time and skills for a short time to solve a problem and then kind of go away again. But things have changed. I mean, I've been lucky that I have always been able to until quite recently keep myself busy, and I've done some really quite cool and interesting stuff.
For sure, people like you, I've always known float into an agency when I've been working there. We're maybe doing a pitch, or someone maybe going on mat leave or something, and you always instantly need someone who can come in, hit the ground running. Given I've only ever worked kind of permanently in places, you get a little bit of a chance to kind of learn the place and the processes and things. It's probably a little bit longer than when you're parachuted in. So I've always thought, my God, you guys are amazing. You just come in day 2, you know where the printer is and you crack on. So I'm certainly aware of the likes of you being such a necessary part of the ad agency world, when sometimes out of nowhere you need someone super senior. It tends to come with a new business win, right? We'll go and do a pitch.
Yeah.
We've got the teams to do this, and everyone internally is going, who's going to fucking do this if we win this? And then people like you can get in overnight to kind of come and steer these ships. So it's a valuable role you guys play. You say it's been probably the longest period you've had in your contracting time where you've been in the Badlands. Where were you last, and when did that end? And was it a shock, or was it you knew it was coming to an end and you just thought, well, like other times, I'll just find my next thing, but not so much this time? Is that how it's happened? What's been going on?
Pretty much. So actually, I'd sort of made the conscious decision to uh, stop contracting, in
Mm.
fact, because there have been some sort of changes. So this is a bit of a longer lead up to where we are now, where I think we've got quite an acute problem. But you'll know, and people listening to this who are also freelance will know that
There's millions of them
the
listening,
way that you
Katrina.
can contract, all those millions of people,
Yep.
the way that you can contract has changed. So with IR35 regulations, etc., it's not as easy for agencies to hire workers, in inverted commas, so those superstar people who come in and sort everything out for 2 months and then sort of bugger off again. You're much more likely to be seen as an employee, especially if you are, an account handler and part of a team, and there's lots of kind of tax implications for that, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So, not very attractive for agencies and not very attractive anymore for contractors. So, I sort of made the decision that I was going to start looking at a longer term solution for my career too, because I'd also been at the same level for quite a long time, and I
Right.
thought I would needed to put down some roots, maybe get a bit of coaching perhaps from someone internally, mentoring into kind of the next stage of my career, if you like. And then COVID hit, and then I had twins, so these two quite seismic events have kind of like pushed me back onto the freelance market, because I haven't had, that there, and we could talk about this, I'm sure we will, there hasn't been the opportunity for the kind of longer term senior roles that I'm looking for. And also I haven't really had the wherewithal to do anything apart from look quite short term at what my next kind of job is going to be, because of family situation and
Yeah.
all the rest of it that sort of
And
changed
also,
around that.
it's so time consuming looking for a job.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like it is. I mean, somebody's already mentioned this on one of your episodes. It can be a full time job if you let it become.
Yeah.
And there is also, when you're freelancing, there's always that kind of element of hustle. There's always that element of like putting
Yeah.
yourself out there. It's kind of like a part of, the role of being a freelancer. Obviously, you do your job that you're paid to do, but there's also a lot of preparation you have to do in order
You're always
to
lining up
secure
the
it.
next branch to grab as you're kind of
Sort of
swinging
like,
through the jungle.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of baked into like what you have to do as part of your day to day. But previously, you've actually mentioned this, when you've been looking for roles as a sort of, a longer term fixed term or, permanent position, you could just ring up your recruiter and go, hey, I'm in the mood for a job. And
Yeah.
they'd go, here are five. You'd go, I like those three. You'd go for like 2 interviews and you'd get one of the jobs. That would be how it worked. With freelancing, it was always kind of the same.
Right.
I would either reach out to my known network, because I was lucky enough to have been doing it for like a fair amount of time, that I have worked at lots of places, so I knew the talent people, I knew who the hiring managers would be, etc., or recruiters, and just say, look, I'm available, and I would never really have to even worry about it. I'd be like, I'm going to be available to work on, the 5th of May. And on the 3rd of May, I would have sorted out where I was going to go.
Right.
And
It's,
that's not been true for a couple of years now.
Yeah, look, it's when when I started my journey in the Badlands, I had a conversation with a recruiter a couple of months in. She said, "Look, would you be open to contracting roles?" And I thought, "Of course, yeah. Of course, I'll go and work somewhere for a few months." I thought that person would then say to me, "Cool, because we've got 3 or 4 here that I think you'd be great for." And she went, "Oh, well, that's great that you do it. There's none of those either." So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll do it. But if there is none of those either, then you kind of, shot me down instantly there. But I think you're right. The changes that clearly have happened, this kind of feels like the agency world's a bit short-termist at the moment, a bit
Yeah.
short-term views. And again, I always say when I'm talking to these people, we can talk shit offline. This isn't about belittling the world of advertising or marketing. It's because clearly we want to be back in it and we love doing it. But I think when you step out a little bit, you do start to notice some of those patterns of maybe now are affecting you. And, networks having hiring freezes for one reason or another and then posting record profits is a weird thing to think about when you go, well, hang on, how come we can't get back in there?
Yeah.
And this kind of, we talked about it offline, kind of clients trying to do a little bit more longer term planning. It used to be the main thing back in the day. You'd start your year, you'd crack on with the briefs, and then halfway through you'd start planning. You'd do workshops to think about the next 12 months or the 18-month plans, and they seem to have stopped. And I'd only reflected on it recently. You kind of stopped seeing that happening a lot. And I don't know, I've touched on it before, the kind of procurement-driven world that it seems to be at the moment. And maybe it's that they just don't have the money for the longer-term view with agencies, and the kind of lack of long-term agency relationships is a problem as well. So
there doesn't seem to be any. I hesitate to use the word investment in the relationship from the client, because I don't think it's like a philosophical thing. I think everybody knows that you only really get amazing work if you've got a huge level of trust, and there is
from both parts,
the ability
right?
Yeah. But you're right, it's a procurement driven thing where nobody's allowed to commit for longer than the next project. And so it's impossible for agency leaders to be trying to walk the corridors and get in at that high level and have those conversations to see exactly what's coming down the line for their clients, so that they can plan, and not just from a budget point of view, from a problem solving point of view.
Yeah, and a brand point of view, and I think it's I've seen recently there's been a spate of campaigns out that are resurrecting old brand platforms, or kind of continuing on old brand platforms that you think, well, you can understand why, because they haven't done any new planning, so they're just pulling out the old ones that clearly worked back in the day, and they're kind of revising them, which I think you can see the benefit of doing that. Look, I think it's, Katrina, I don't want this to be two suits sat around talking shit about
solving the world.
Because
give us back our seat at the table, because we know how to fix it.
Yeah, and let us come in and talk shit when we're actually working, because that's what we're really good at. So look, you're clearly looking at the moment, and how long has this period of downtime been longer than you'd experienced previously?
Yeah,
and if so,
has.
kind of in that time, what have the experiences been like compared to previously? You've already mentioned the heady days of calling your recruiter and they'd bring 5 options back to you. I remember those days. At the moment, how are you finding it? And, what's the good, the bad, and the ugly? And what have you noticed which is just crazily soul destroying? Because I think, again, I'm trying to make people who are listening, all those millions of people listening, understand what it's like. And then the people who are listening who are in a similar situation realize that it's not just them, because I think it's a big part of this. It can be, there was a post this morning on LinkedIn from a recruiter just outlining some of the emails that she's getting, where it's, I'm close to having to move back to my parents. I'm going to get kicked out of my flat. My savings have gone. There's real world issues attached to this beyond, just moaning about the state of the ad industry. There are human beings attached to it with real world things at stake. So have you found this time?
You touched on something really important there. Like for me, I'm pretty cushioned because for 2 reasons. One, I have like a supportive partner and we're solvent. He's freelance too, but he does a different thing. He's a photographer. He does a lot of sort of sports and editorial stuff, and people always want to like kick balls at each other and throw stuff a long way and all the rest of it. So he's keeping us afloat to a certain extent. I've got another job as well. So I'm also sort of part of a strategy consultancy, and normally, the two sides of my career like work really well hand in hand. So I do the kind of freelance advertising stuff like more than I do the strategy consultancy stuff.
Right.
But at the moment, I'm not really doing either. And it's the same macro problem, which is the economy, which is, dialed both of those things right down. But I'm also lucky in that I've been doing it for a long time and I've got a big network. So just to give you a bit of background as to what's happened over the last 3 years, I mentioned, COVID, and I had twins. which happened almost at the same time. I had my kids in sort of 2020. And I did go back to work actually during COVID as a freelancer when the babies were about 5 months old. A little bit out of panic, to be honest, because I was worried. Sam, my partner at that time, wasn't working because there wasn't any sport.
Yeah, of course.
And so I was like, oh, somebody needs to like be bringing in the money. Obviously, I've managed my finances as a freelancer. You're able to, earn a bunch of cash and then etc. So I was okay, but I wanted to make sure that it didn't run out. So I went back. And I was able to get like 2 or 3 kind of freelance gigs in 2020 and 2021, which was surprising because, the world was pretty shut down. But they were all kind of work at home things, and was able to work around the kids because business was still happening. Things still needed to kind of go on, and that was cool. But then I decided that I wanted to take a full-time job somewhere, and actually sort of stepped out of advertising a bit and went to work for a bookseller in a really different role for me as well. And it was a insight and innovation lead. So using a lot of the sort of skills and stuff that I've got from all the things that I've done for various clients, but working for a client, if you like, in-house, in a really sort of different world. So borrowing lots of stuff from like UX and design thinking that I'd learned as an agency person, but kind of running this innovation lab, which I loved. Then they made me redundant. So I was kind of like back on the scene, if you like.
Yeah.
And this would have been January 2022. So I was like, cool, that's all right. I don't mind. In COVID, I managed to get all these jobs. I'll just like go back and freelance. And I sort of rang up, my recruiters, as I mentioned, like you used to be able to. And they were like, oh, Trina, sorry, you've been out of it for a year now. Like, it's not really how it works anymore. We don't have all this work floating around for you, sorry. And I was really sort of stopped in my tracks, like, oh no, what have I done? I've like taken myself out of the game, and now I'm finding it hard to get back in. Fortunately, a friend of mine who has her own agency, Sarah Stratford, who I used to work with years and years ago, at AIS, and we've been friends, ever since. She has an agency called Favour the Brave, who sort of specialise in helping service brands. And she was like, well, we're servicing a client at the moment through another agency, which is part of the Weber Shandwick Collective. And actually we could really do with some senior suit to help steer some of these tricky conversations. It's a big global project. You'd be perfect, actually. And it's only fractional. Like, we don't need you all the time. Just come in, every now and again when there's a tricky conversation with a senior person that sort of needs help with. And that job actually kept me in bread and butter for nearly the whole of last year. I was just doing like 2 or 3 days a week for them. But that ended sort of last Christmas. And since then, I have had a couple of pitches that I've helped out on. And again, that's happened because I've known the resource guy, or I've known the planner who's like, actually, we need to put somebody's photo in the deck, like you were saying. If we win the business, we're going to need somebody to be there in the first 30 days. Could that be you? So that's happened, and I'm doing that at the moment as well.
It's probably a niche little job that we could create, where you could just be you could give your license to be used in pitch decks for ad agencies to use. Yes, this is Jared.
Jared, actually be like, oh yes.
Fake bios and stuff.
Great idea, isn't it?
Yeah, fake bio of this person. This is what he's done, and he's going to come in and smash this role if you give us the job. Jared doesn't exist actually. It's just an AI bot that we're going to create.
Is it going to be an AI bot that's just filled with like a load of CVs from people who are real business directors?
That's amazing.
Just create the ideal.
Right, let's cancel this conversation bullshit and let's go and make that.
So anyway, so that's where I am. So since January, which is like a long old time, and I've had like about 6 weeks worth of work like in that time.
Right.
And I know you've had longer, but it's a weird sensation because, like I say, like I'm usually like pretty used to and comfortable like being in and out of work because it's always always been around the corner. Right? So I've never had to worry. I've always been able to really enjoy my downtime because I knew that something was going to come along in the not too distant future. So I've never had this experience that I'm having now, which is I don't really feel like I can relax
No, for
and
sure.
enjoy all the things about being out of work because I don't know when the next thing is going to come.
No, I've got two friends who are a senior creative team, and they're fantastic, and they've been contracting for the last 5-6 years, and maybe a bit longer actually. And I remember they used to carve their year up, so they'd always have July and August off, knowing that they could just work till then and take that time off and then come back in September, like living the dream. I was speaking to him the other week and he's like, no, we've taken this thing till the end of the year because it's chaos out there for creatives and that kind of contractors, like you were saying. So they've changed their...
I think they have it a lot worse.
Yeah, for sure. So it's what used to be very appealing to you in your particular approach to working in the ad industry is kind of been removed. In this search, is there any, in your search period at this time, like what have been the patterns or things that you've noticed, apart from the obviously there's no jobs, but when you are applying for something, how you find in the process? I'm going to be having a conversation with someone from one of the major talent firms, recruitment agents from our industry. She's going to be popping in next week and we'll do a slightly different version of this. She's going to try and give a little bit of support and understanding from the recruiter side of things, third party recruiter side of things, on how people can navigate this crazy time. But how have you found it? Like what are the good, the bad and the ugly?
So I think you've mentioned this on sort of one of your previous conversations.
Oh, it's the same shit every time.
Roles that I think I should walk.
Yeah.
Like roles that I think they should be coming up to me and begging me to do this because I have exactly what they've asked for and more in spades.
Wait, they've taken my name off that job spec. That's the name. That's the job. Yeah.
I'm not even getting seen. Like I'm not even getting shortlisted. And I know that is sometimes it's a factor. The thing that I would say is the only times that I have had a useful conversation, I have already had an in at that organisation.
Yeah, the networking's so important at this stage.
It's so important. And I don't mean like, this is just like people that I've met at drinks after a Women in Leadership, conference or anything like that. These are people that I know and have worked with. Yeah. So that is really, and that's always been, kind of true. But I've never been... I feel like a little bit like blanked by all these places. If I haven't already worked there, it feels like the door is shut to me.
The same. There was a role that came up the other week at an agency I'd never worked at, always wanted to, and one of those odd occasions on LinkedIn where it didn't say I knew anyone who worked there, which is odd, right? After 20 odd years, there's normally some connection that goes they're there. So instantly I just thought, well, that's pointless for me to apply to because there's not someone you can go, hey, Dave, can you go and put my CV on the talent team's desk? Because I've sent it on LinkedIn with the 7,000 other people, but can you do me a solid? And if you don't have that at the minute, it's even harder. I think it's like when you're trying to get fit or weight loss, you have to pull on lots of different levers. There's not one single thing that does it, unfortunately. And I think it's the same with this particular thing we're living through. You have to be doing lots of different things. And I think that's one thing I want people who are listening to this in the similar position to us kind of start to do a little bit more. I think you go through the kind of arc of, well, my recruiter will sort it out. And then you go, I'm not hearing from them. Okay, I'll reach out to the talent folk. You get a lot of, hey, great CV. As soon as we've got something, I'll give you a shout. And then you see them put out a job that you could do and you think, well, maybe they've forgotten about me, or maybe they were lying. Maybe they were talking shit.
Do you know what? You've just touched on something really important as well, which is that you start to lose a bit of hope, and you do think, well, there's no point. There's no point in me even I can't even be bothered, and then that's really dangerous. So I've started to try and keep the faith. Somebody got that job, I have to.
Of course, and I think it's also important, even though there are some, people who desperately need something straight away. Equally, I've been always lucky that whenever I didn't get something, I always just thought, oh, maybe I just wasn't supposed to work there. That's fine. The thing I get to do is the thing I was supposed to go and do, right? I'm not particularly religious or spiritual, but there's a sense of, oh, no, it's cool. I'm going to go and work here. And at this, I think in this period, I think it's important to kind of try and keep that sense of, well, I'm just not meant to go to that place, even though I really need to because I've got car payments and things. But
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to just hold on to self-worth and, what you enjoy doing. And I know it's hard and it might sound silly to say. And I applied to somewhere that I didn't want to work. I was like, why would I do that? I've heard it's awful here. But it was the only one that was on LinkedIn that day that was available to me. And so I think one of the things I'm trying to have people who are listening to this and listen to us, don't start just panicking. I think it's like we wouldn't advise a client to target everyone. Everyone will buy your shit. It's like, no. Let's be quite specific and focused when we're trying to get people to understand your thing. And I think you have to do that for yourself a little bit more. So knowing
And
what
the thing I'd say as well is that there does seem to be a bit more choice out there in terms of jobs available. Because when I was first looking in 2022, there was nothing. There was, there was like, maybe like one head of brand role, and like there were no business director roles hiring at all. And by the way, I'm agnostic as well at this stage. I don't mind. Like I'll take
you can
a
go either way, right?
freelance
Yeah.
agency role. I'd go into the client side very, very happily for the right organization. I'd take a permanent job at either of those. Like I'm really open minded, but I am really trying to stay true to my principles. Like you say,
Yeah.
I'm not going to apply to an agency that I've worked at before that I didn't like, or an agency that I know people who've worked at and
No,
haven't
good.
enjoyed. I'm not going to work on a client whose values don't align with mine.
Right.
Um,
Because,
like, and that has been a temptation
of
because no one
course.
else wants to work on those clients either. So you're like, well, at least it would be money, but you'd be miserable. So
No, I had
yeah,
had a call with a new recruiter a couple of weeks ago, and she's asked about money. And I said, look, if it's somewhere shit or a shit client, they've got to pay me a lot. If it's somewhere I love or I've always wanted to work and the team's amazing, then the money conversation is different. And
yeah,
I think that's true even in these shitty situations that we find ourselves in, because the second that you start to go to work on that Monday and it's all shit, you'd be like, oh God, this is. I wish I'd made some slightly different choices. This I don't want it to again. I keep saying let's not turn it into just talking shit. It's hard, but what advice? I think you've mentioned it. I don't need to ask a question about advice, but clearly the personal network and networking is fundamental in this particular period that we find ourselves in. Would you say that that's given you the most joy in the last couple of months, right? Out of your usual ways of finding the thing, is it your own network still that's the number one
yeah,
thing?
definitely.
Yeah.
And you have to be really. So I kind of hesitate to give anyone advice necessarily, but like for me, I've had to swallow my pride a bit
Right.
and been quite proactive in reaching out to people. So
Yeah.
it's not enough to just update your LinkedIn status with some sort of jokey quip about, unbelievably still available. Can't understand why, I'm so great. You have to target
Wait, did
people
you
that
see
you
my
know.
last one? Yeah.
So I mentioned, my old friend Sarah, but I was not shy about sort of texting her and saying, look, I'm out of work. This has happened. And she was not the only person that I reached out to. She was the only person who had something useful for me to do. But you have to go out there and let people know.
You know,
And if you think about it, if the shoe was on the other foot, you wouldn't mind if someone texted you and said, look,
not at all. No, and there's a few people I know who are in a similar position to us who are really embarrassed about their position and will happily
yeah,
talk to me privately. If I said, "Hey, do you want to do a thing?" and they're like, "Oh, I don't know." I'm like, there's no downside to letting people know that you're skilled, talented, passionate, and would like to come and work somewhere. There's no downside to doing that. There's only a downside if people don't know you're around,
yeah.
right?
And
That's
that's
the
a
only
really,
bad
really
thing.
good spin to put on it. And I know there's a lot of chat at the moment about whether or not people should have their open to work banner
Fuck
on
those
their LinkedIn
people.
profile. I mean, like, yes, you should, and yes, you. I mean, I've never taken it off because I have always, in theory,
Right.
been
Yeah,
open to
yeah,
work.
yeah.
I'm always in open to a conversation, um, and there isn't there in any case, in any world, there is no shame in looking for
No, look,
somewhere to
Link,
use your skills. But in the current
LinkedIn,
climate, there is. I mean, literally,
and
there
talking
is
about LinkedIn, it's
nothing in it.
particularly where that's a thing. LinkedIn is a CRM database for recruiters and headhunters and internal talent teams. It's nothing else, right? So people posting anything beyond work related stuff, I always find a touch odd. I saw a very funny thing the other day. Someone someone said Marcus Rashford being left out of the England squad. I can't wait until someone posts about that and how it affects their SAS sales skills and their approach to online selling, because people just do pivot to random things. Um, I think if you're
I got
open, if you're
engaged at
looking,
the weekend. Here's what it taught me about my funnel.
yeah, yeah, no, I love those ones because that person's wife must be pleased as punch. I think if you're looking for a job, you have to let people know you're looking for a job.
Mm.
One of my very early mentors used to say, "It's pointless having gold bars for sale for $1 if you don't tell anyone about it, right?" And you are a gold bar for sale at the minute, so people need to know that they can get a really good deal. Um, excuse me. In terms of how you're managing it's good that you've clearly got a lot on with twins, and sounds like you've got a partner who's busy and able to keep some of the existential things that start affecting people, money and stresses that come with that, a little bit at bay. How are you finding managing your mental health, and how are you keeping yourself sane throughout this? Because I think that was the thing I went through. I just went, this is nuts, and I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. And then what I started to do was just structure my week,
Yeah.
carve out. There's a bit of time for job hunting, there's a bit of time for follow up, but then I have to look after myself from a health point of view and a physical point of view, and do stuff like when you're not going into the city and stuff, you kind of start just, it's so easy to go, well, I'll try and finish Netflix, all of it. Well, you can't. That's not going to be progressive. So
Yeah, and your
how are
world
you
ends up
managing
getting.
your time?
You have to be careful that your world doesn't end up getting really small as well. Because you're right, if you haven't got a commute, then, even if you're taking yourself off to like a coffee shop or something, you might not be leaving your postcode, which then makes it really hard for you to get out of your head and your
Yeah,
situation. So the thing I do is I still move around a lot, and like I mentioned, at the moment I'm really lucky because I have got a little bit of freelance work on at the moment. So I
yeah,
am, in and out of town. So there is something to counteract the job hunt. I've taken half term off next week. I took Easter off, as in sort of school holidays, from my job of job hunting.
yeah.
And it's a gift to be able to do that and not have to like worry about,
I did the same.
the
No,
fact you've got to
I had to
balance
do
your
the
annual
same.
leave with everybody else or whatever, because, I
I
don't have
think
a
what,
job, so I can take it.
yeah, I'm kind of mirroring what I remember from the ad world when you're in it. Like, no one does anything at Christmas, no one does anything at
Yeah.
half term, no one does anything at Easter. Like, people are away, a lot of senior folk with families and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's important to kind of get out and about. And I saw a friend of mine, he posted something the other day, like Mondays is just dead. There's no new job activity on Mondays, which I'd probably agree with actually. Mondays and Fridays tend to be days where now I'm like, no, well, I'm not even going to talk to myself. So I think it's important
Yeah.
for people listening to go, actually, don't feel bad about you think you might not be making progress today. If you've sent out some chasers, if you've networked with someone, if you've met someone new, if you've let some old folk that you used to work with know, then that is what you can be doing at the moment. It's a hustle, it's a grind, but you don't.
Do something every day which like at least feels productive, and
Yeah,
it doesn't need to be anything to do with your job hunt. So it could just be, I mean, last Friday I went through, we've got this like stack of drawers which is just full of like all the plastic crap that you get in party bags.
right.
And like I just
This
like,
podcast
and like
going way
little
off topic
toy
right now.
cars and like sort of slightly broken things. But I went through it and I sorted it all out, and I gave what was like giftable to the charity shop, binned everything else, tied everything up, hoovered out, the toy box. Like, it was a good 3 hour section of my day, which is not related to anything about trying to find a job or get money. But I felt fulfilled because I'd achieved something was
Exactly.
actually useful. And so if you have some time, like do that shit, like sort your
No,
finances,
for sure.
look for a better mortgage deal, wash the car yourself. I did that, like so the stuff that you think that you would like to do in theory if you had more time, now you've got time, like to try and make yourself do that. Do not, this is a mistake that I probably did make, and that kind of like in February when I started to think, oh God, I'm never going to work again, which was spend just refreshing the job section on LinkedIn or going across all the different jobs boards, and like it's just fruitless. Like trust that, if you're putting yourself out there, like something will come to you. Still look for the jobs that are interesting, and don't be put off applying if you see that 150 people have already done it, but do it in a different way. Like don't use the easy apply thing on LinkedIn.
No,
See if you
try and find a different way in and things like that. That's
if you
clearly
know somebody,
it's a theme
or
that's
even if you
running.
don't know them, like see if you can work out who the hiring manager might be and write to them and say, I'm really excited about this and this is why, and I'm going to follow the the protocol for applying for it anyway, but I just wanted to reach out and connect and let you know.
Yeah, if 100%, I think that's my approach at the moment. It's a bit more laser targeted. It's a little bit more. I've gone back to network focused kind of approach. Doing these things is fun, and I really enjoy speaking to people, and it's really if 5 people listen to this, I mean 5 million obviously, but if 5 people listen to this and one of them thinks, actually, I remember Katrina, I used to work with her, then that's great, right? Because it's this type of stuff. It's out trying to go to a networking thing, which is hard these days, particularly when you're not in the game at the moment. But I think keeping going is a theme that's popping up throughout these conversations with people. And I'm obviously chatting to people whilst we set up doing an official recording, and there's a lot of themes popping up, which I'm going to be talking to a recruiter, as I mentioned. I'm actually talking to a careers coach on one of these episodes coming up in the next week or two, who's going to start to talk about there are ways to take your skills that you've developed and transfer them to other industries and sectors. And I think that's an important thing for people to remember, right? We've only done, for the most part, one thing in one industry for the vast majority of our life, and then you go, well, actually, I've got such a transferable skill set, and maybe using some of this downtime to look at other options is an important part of this, rather than amongst doing the day-to-day search of trying to fulfill your needs for solving some of your life things. But I think it's a nice opportunity as well to kind of look at a bigger picture, which you don't normally get to do when your head's down and you're doing a pitch and you're in your client.
You don't. And if you think there's some training or something that you have missed out on, or that you wanted to do, that now's the time to have a look at that too. I mean, even like keynote training, like practicing some of, like you can do that for free. Like that's something I did.
There's this thing, I don't know if you've heard of it, that's coming out. It's AI. I've seen it mentioned once or twice.
No,
it's going to take everyone's
someone was
jobs.
talking about this, but I'm not. Yeah, what?
So maybe we could learn how to do that. I don't know.
Do you know, if I had my time again, I was going to say, if I had my time again, I would have learned to code. And you can.
You can do that now. Yeah, you can do that.
You can. I could do that now. Good night. I could do that now. I don't know. I've actually, like, the keynote thing's serious, because I reckon like there would be another job for me as a PowerPoint designer, or as like a.
Well, I tell you what, the keynote designer on pitches becomes the most important resource on any pitch.
Yeah.
If you get that person right, you smash it. If that person can't handle the chaos, then the entire thing goes to pieces. So maybe we just retrain as keynote designers and charge £1,000 an hour over pitch time to come and do keynotes and sit there whilst people change slides repeatedly. Look, Katrina, it's been an amazing chat with you. You're clearly very talented. You clearly know your stuff, and you could clearly work somewhere tomorrow if they needed you to come in. Just last couple of questions. Do you have an ideal role or an ideal sector or an ideal brand or anyone that you go, I've always wanted to work for?
I don't, but and I have this actually on my LinkedIn profile, and it actually has drawn a little bit of criticism. So it's like, I think it's an interesting thing. I like to do work with meaning. I mentioned earlier that I've turned down, not roles, but I've turned down kind of even having conversations with agencies whose practices, let's say, I found slightly nefarious, or clients who, or organisations, in fact, like going directly into kind of brand roles or like customer marketing roles with businesses who I don't think necessarily have the world's best interests at heart. So I like to work with purpose. And
So
it's a bit of a dirty...
I was going to say, so if you got a call today asking you to do petrochemicals Inc., you probably wouldn't go and do that.
Well, that's exactly why I am not like that. Is one of that is exactly one of the kind of examples.
Yeah. No, I get it.
And absolutely no shade on people who don't mind doing that kind of stuff.
No, I'm a mercenary. I'll go and do it. It's fine. I'll do it.
Good. Okay, there's one area where we're not going to be in conflict then, Dan.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so I'm really quite purpose driven, and like it's getting a lot of shit at the moment, purpose driven marketing, I know. But I do think, like, what's the alternative? Like, we all just go to work to make rich men richer. Like, come on, like, we have the ability as, marketers to change hearts and minds, influence behaviour, and actually like make massive difference. And it doesn't just have to be like getting people to buy more tubes of toothpaste. There's a power within this industry that I think is still quite latent to actually do something quite amazing. And so that is where I want to be. That job in itself, I don't think exists yet. Obviously, there are purpose-driven agencies, etc., but they tend to focus more on either doing kind of ESG programs for otherwise quite naughty brands, or they just
a little bit of cheeky greenwashing here and there. Yeah,
not really what I mean. What I want to do is, work with organisations to help solve some of the like really big stinking problems that the world has got. I think I probably need to get in that in kind of like a snaky way and start working with a brand just like trying to solve their own commercial problems until I show them that the commercial problem is the fact we live on a burning planet. Anyway, that's what I want to do.
Well, no, I love it. It's important. And you have young children, I have a young child, and you start to think about those things a lot more when that happens to you. So I think with that, Katrina, thank you so much for your time. Clearly having twins is a full-time job. Looking for a job is a full-time job. You've got a little bit of freelance work, but I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences and some tips. And it does help when people hear that, this is how they're doing it. So it goes without saying thank you. You're available, I would imagine, as long as it's not for... As long as it's not for,
it's not for like evil bastards court.
Mr. Burns type character here.
I am available after the 10th of June. I shall be available. So
okay, great. And anybody listening, what am I talking about? There's millions of people listening. All you millions of listeners, please share this with your network. Let's get Katrina top of mind again for those internal teams and those people that do need someone to parachute in, come and smash a project, a pitch. Like she's clearly knows how to do that, which is a skill in itself. So let's try and get people super aware of Katrina and her skills again. Katrina, thank you. Have a great day. Have a great week.
Thank you. And
good luck with your search.
Thanks.
No, you're welcome. And look, anyone else, anyone in the Badlands like us, remember, you're not alone. And keep moving forward. It's something that we've talked about today, but keep going. It will change. It's cyclical, but you have to do a little bit a different approach to what we've all done in the last 20 years. So I hope you've heard something today. You think, actually, I'm going to try that a little bit more. Just trying all these new things is key to it. So thank you, Katrina.
Cheers.
No worries.